Whether it be my story or my guest stories, we all share parts of the human experience. In our own ways, we have all faced triumph and challenges, both joy and pain, both gratitude and grief. My life changed forever on October 11, 2019, the day I had a stroke. It had a ripple effect, not only for me, but also for those I cherish. Through grace, we are here today to pay it forward. It's my mission to focus on what brings us together and help people find their path through life stories. Life for Cathy Romero has had ups and downs. She has had her various struggles, but these have led her to a place people generally do not go. Her current journey is powerful. This is a story not to be missed. I always say that everybody has a story, and Cathy has an inspiring one. Welcome to our series, The Power of a Voice. Let's get started. So, welcome to the show, Cathy. And first and foremost, I love you.
Me too.
And you're the reason that I'm motivated to do this series. So thank you. I'm going to kiss and tell that you were with me at the time of my stroke. And there are two things that I really remember. One, you just looking in my eyes when I couldn't speak, and you told Aaron I was scared and looking for help, and I was. Mm-hmm. And you knew that what my passion was for reading for children. And when I was in my hospital bed, you brought your daughter, Brooke, and she crawled up in my bed and read to me while I cried. Mm-hmm. I will never forget that. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of laughs when I couldn't talk and a lot of tears. But as I got better, one day we went for a walk and you cried to me. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think it was unique to watch you go through something so vulnerable and so life-changing that it opened the door for me that when I started to walk through the season with my son with substance abuse, I felt safe to come to you because you had let your wall down with me when you had walked through your process of healing and having to relearn things.
The word was safe. I always remember you said you could talk to me because you felt safe.
Yeah, I think I'm a firm believer in vulnerability breeds vulnerability, and you were so vulnerable with me that it gave me a safe place to land and share my story. Mm-hmm. Plus, I think you've always been judgment-free. I've never felt when I come to you that you're saying one thing, but you can tell when somebody's thinking another, and I never felt that way with you. I just felt safe that you just accepted me for who I was. So when I think it was a couple years ago, it was right after your stroke, we discovered that my son had a problem with substance abuse and was using, and it was bad. It was right around the time of COVID, and he was isolated from school, from his friends. And so he was sneaking out in the middle of the night to catch up with them, and they started drug use. And it was something that was so unfamiliar for me because I never had dealt with that growing up. I'd never walked that path. And I just came to you scared as a mom of, I didn't know how to help him, but I knew he needed help. And it was kind of one of those taboo things that you don't talk about. I think a lot of times you can talk about certain things that go on in your family or with your kids, but drug use is such a shaming experience to walk through, because as a parent you hold that, like, what did I do wrong? We had just recently gone through a divorce, so I think internally I blamed myself a lot, like, did I cause this? Did I do it?
But you remarried.
I divorced for 2 years, and then by the grace of God and a lot of work within the prison, I was not the one there, but working with people who are incarcerated was a healing experience for me and my husband, and I got remarried after 2 years. And My son's drug use started during that time, but I don't think we realized the extent of it until we were back together in the same home, because Christian had been split between 2 homes. And it wasn't until we were back in the same home that we really saw the gravity of it, because he was no longer going between 2 houses anymore.
So at what point did you say, make the discovery?
Yeah, so I knew it was really bad. My husband, he works a lot, and I don't think he was aware how bad it was. And it was just that parent intuition where there had been a hole he had punched in his wall probably a year prior when he had been mad. And over the course of a year, he had been hiding his drugs in there. And when he had used something and it was done, like whether it was a butane lighter or a glass pipe or wrappers from drugs, it had become this storage place with lots of dryer sheets to disguise the smell. And I remember it was just this weird gut. I had said to my husband, I said, I think something might be in the wall. And I have no idea why I thought that. To me, I attribute that to God, motherly instinct. And my husband went upstairs and got a Sawzall. I had made the comment, but didn't really think too much into it. Cut the wall open, and the entire wall for a year's worth of stuff was lined. And I think he was the one that had to cut it open, and he had to see it for him to be like, this really is that bad. And that's, I think, when I just fell to my knees of I didn't just hopelessness of what do we do? And then picked myself up and started making phone calls to parents that I knew. There was only one actually other parent I knew that had walked that journey, because their son had used with our son. Mm-hmm. And they referred us to an education consultant who then walked us through that there was no way at the extent of his use he would get better unless he was removed from the environment he was in.
Tell me about what you had to do to get Christian help.
So it happens really fast. They tell you when you know that you need to send them, you need to act on it, because emotions can be very deceiving, that you can go back and forth if I can't send him away, and to really go with that gut instinct of knowing he needs help and act on it quick. So it was a matter of, I think, probably 2 days from the time we first connected with the education consultant who said he needs rehab. So we chose a place in Utah in the middle of nowhere. He slept outside, ate outside, lived outside. And so then it was the thing of, I so badly wanted him to want it so that we wouldn't have to have him taken there against his will. So we tried to talk to him the night we had spoken to the education consultant and said, we know things are bad. This is what we found. I believe he was high when we were speaking to him and in complete just excusing it away. Oh, that's not my stuff. The usual when you deal with somebody who has an addiction.
Mom. Yeah,
it's not mine. So I said, if you want help, we could get you help right now. And I so badly wanted him to want it so we could walk it with him. And he was adamant against it and took off. And it was the first time he's really ever, I don't know if you consider it run away, but he took off and left and said he wouldn't come home till we promised not to send him somewhere. I think he knew. There were lots of moments for me of just on my knee moments of, God, I trust you with him. I hand him over to you. I love him. And I know that I can't help him. And I think as a parent, that is one of the hardest things to realize. Your kids need help greater than what you as a parent can do.
In your story, you told me about the best day, which was the day that Christian got kidnapped, taken away, the day that you and Aaron and he spent together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. When you were saying best day, I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's funny how your mind blocks certain things out, but you're right. It was, we didn't want to do anything to set him off the days leading up to the guys coming to take him. So I was kind of in a mode of whatever keeps him just calm, because we didn't want him to take off again. Mm-hmm. And so the day that I knew that the guys were coming to take him, always come in the evening once it's dark, because they don't want neighbors to see. They don't want the people to be out in the neighborhood where the kid starts to react to get somebody else's attention, because then it just can get really messy with police involvement. And so they were flying in from Utah, and they said, when we land, we'll call you. So that morning when I woke up, it was such a surreal feeling of knowing he would be leaving, but that it was what he needed. It's such a pull of a heart and a mind of my mind knew he needed it. My heart was so broken. And that morning he woke up and didn't want to go to school. And in the past I would have been like, you gotta go. And I think they had just opened the doors for COVID again. Like, they were only in there about half the time, but he could go back in. And I just thought, Cathy, don't pick this battle. This is your last day with him. And before, he had been going to school. He hadn't really been going to class. He had been going out and getting high with friends, but he had been leaving the house. And I said, then just stay home today. And selfishly, I was kind of thankful because I knew he'd be leaving that evening. And he just kind of hung out, and we had ordered a desk for him for his room for school weeks or months before that was on back order. And it arrived that day. And so we sat in his room, Aaron, his dad and I, Aaron, and put his desk together. And we both were just looking at each other with just our eyes filled with tears because he was so sweet. It was like for that moment we had our kid back. And I don't know how to explain it, but I didn't question what we were doing. I knew we needed to do it, that he was still, that moment was a rarity. That was not what we were experiencing daily with him. But that evening, my husband cooked dinner. We all ate dinner together, and we hadn't had those moments in quite a while. And I just look back and think it was God's gift of like, you need this, you need something to hang on to. He's about to leave. And we had this beautiful day. And even my husband was like, this is the biggest head trip I've ever walked through in my life, because I'm looking at him, laughing with him, building a desk, knowing he's about to be taken away. And we didn't know if he would fight the guys when they came. We were prepared for the worst. We removed our daughter from the home, took her to a friend's house, because I didn't want her last memories of this situation to be, if he went crazy, what that would look like. So I went out and met them, and but they do it real quick, which I'm thankful for. You know, they introduced themselves. And they said, you know, walk us in, introduce us to your son, tell him you love him, tell him goodbye, hug him.
Yep.
And then you have to leave, because if he knows you're in the house, he could go crazy to get your attention and sympathy as a parent to stop it. And my husband is a very tough, macho guy. He's an ex-MMA fighter. And he broke down like I've never seen before and just hugged him. He couldn't verbally get much out to my son other than I love you. And when the guys came, Christian had smoked right after we put his desk together. He was pretty high, which I think that is the only time I'll say him being high was probably a blessing, because he didn't react. I do not think he could quickly process what was happening. So he was very calm. The guys are quite a presence. So I think he was just almost in shock, and he was slow processing because he was high. And we left, and my husband and I just drove around in a car, and we have a security system, and just watched, waiting for the car to leave. Yeah. This sounds morbid, but I saved that video and I watched it over and over because it was the last time I saw him. And when he left, they found drugs on him, which is a blessing as well, because every time I'd ever caught Christian, it was never on him. So he could always excuse it. And as a parent, sometimes you want to believe the lies. You don't want to believe it's as bad as what it is. And when they texted, when they had him in the car, they said, we found substantial amount of drugs on him. We left him on the kitchen table. And I think I needed to hear that, because still in some bizarre way in the back of my head, I knew it was bad, but I didn't want to believe that was my kid. So I think I needed to know that they had found it on him, that we were doing the right thing.
Okay. In hindsight, do you think, whatever you believe, that you had that day with Christian, the happy day, because that was your son, and you were going through this journey to get that?
Yeah, to get that back.
Yeah.
It was a gift.
Yeah. So you saw that.
There were so many blessings, so many, between my husband finding the things in the wall. You can sit there and harp on the negativity of it, or look for the blessing behind it, because this could have wrecked our marriage. We could have, like if we weren't both in sync with this decision, my husband probably would have done it for me, because I typically make most of the decisions, but he emotionally might have always resented me had he not made the discovery himself to be like, this is bad. That was a blessing. To have the day with him, to see our son again for who he was. Yeah. Knowing that, like, that's the kid we're going to get back.
The part about, would you get your kid back?
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah.
Especially when they start drug use so young. It gets a hold on a brain that is not developed yet. And I probably will never know the extent of what he did. He shared a lot through rehab and after rehab, but I don't know that I'll ever fully know all of it. And I learned so much through it because it wasn't rehab for just our son. It was rehab for our family.
Tell me about that.
So he was not allowed to talk to us for the first month and a half, which I was okay with because I knew if I heard his voice and he was
Crying,
wanting to come home, I knew I wouldn't bring him home. I never once regretted or thought we did the wrong thing. But still, there's still that heart pull of a mom of like, I want to go get my kid.
Yeah.
And my husband's even worse than I am. Like, there was a few times he's wanted to get in his car and go grab him, just because that's your baby, And so we didn't talk to him, but he could write a letter every week. And how it would work is he'd write a letter in the wilderness, and then it was brought in on a dune buggy. And then they would scan it in and send it to us. And literally every week that was the highlight, and they would send pictures of him, so we got to see him. It was just a process for us. We had to write letters back, but they would read our letters first, and then they might come back to us and say, this is kind of manipulative, or this is blaming.
Wow.
Things that maybe we didn't even notice, wasn't intentional, but I think we carry on cycles until somebody says, look at this for what it is, totally neutral, they're not involved, and there were times it was humbling where I'm like
what?
So our divorce, I walked away from our marriage. There was a lot of dysfunction on both of our ends, but I ultimately was the one that had walked away. So Christian was holding my choice to walk away from our marriage of that's why I'm using. And I walked right into that of feeling that guilt, that shame, that responsibility. And so the counselor would work with me of you apologize, let Christian hear you walk through it, which I had done before, but now he's sober, totally dead cold sober hearing it. And then you move on from that, Cathy. You are not held captive by that. You are not responsible. And that was hard for me because
I know.
Yeah, it's just hard to say. And I think I almost loved punishing myself. Like, Cathy, you did this. And maybe, so it's almost very powerless when I say, okay, I'm letting that piece go. I really don't have control over whether he gets better or not. This has to be his journey to walk.
Okay, tell me about Brooke, your daughter, and how she dealt with all this.
I think substance abuse takes over. And I think that was one of the things the counselors talked with us about is you have a daughter that needs you more than anything right now. Go love on her. Like when Christian was gone, there's so much grief, tremendous grief. And they said, focus on that, acknowledge it. Now go be with your daughter. And you almost feel guilty going out and making these memories because he's not there and you miss him. And he
resents that.
Yeah. Yeah. And he resented her for a long time because he just thought life was easy for her. And it wasn't. She just worked really hard.
A letter that she wrote to him that you shared?
Yeah, so at first she was very angry when he left. And I had talked to her before we had them come take our son. And I said, this is what is going to happen. She said, good. You should have done this a long time ago. Because she saw the chaos.
You were in it.
We were in it.
And she was looking out.
She was a part of it, but she was on the outside. Yeah. And she's like, this should have happened a long time ago. And then as the weeks and months went by and she'd see pictures of him and he's doing well and he's taking accountability in letters, she missed him. That was her brother. That's her only other partner through our divorce. Even though her parents weren't together, they were still together. So I think that really hit her of like, I want him home. I miss him. That's my buddy. So she wrote him a letter and was just so sweet. I thought it might be more angry, because he had stolen money from her. He had lied to her. He had tremendous anger towards her of jealousy where she'd have to lock her door to be safe when he would rage when he was high. And she just said, I hope you're doing good. I love seeing pictures of you. She complimented him on successes he had been making in rehab. She's extraordinary.
So Cathy, you had to have been proud of Brooke, right? That you instilled that sense of being and that sense of security of who she is, that she could write that letter to Christian. And what was his response?
So he didn't write her for a while. I think even though he had hurt Aaron and I a lot and lied to us, what he had done to his sister, he couldn't face for quite a while. That was the hardest relationship for him to mend when he came home. I think he had so much guilt knowing that she hadn't done anything, but his insecurities had provoked the anger.
Were you surprised at that?
No, because although she would get angry and frustrated with him, she still had such a tender spot for him. They've had this, siblings have an incredible bond that is just so very different than parents. They're not the authoritarian, they're not the disciplinarian. So they have a connection that just bonds them. So it took a while for the two of them.
Okay, so Christian was there.
So Christian was gone for 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, they did suggest that we send him to residential inpatient, which means essentially he would go to a boarding school. One of the hardest things with substance abuse or anybody with addiction is to go back to the same people, places, things. All three are triggers. I think both of us agreed the residential, of course, the cost was astronomical. You're looking at like $100,000 to $200,000
Save
for
my
a year.
kid, but pay the bill first.
So there was definitely the financial aspect, but we also believed at that time he was 15 that we still had a chance to work with him. He wasn't so far in his addiction that we didn't believe there wasn't something we could still do at home. And selfishly, we wanted our kid home. Yeah. We grieved him for 3 months. I mean, never regretted what we did, but we wanted him home.
We grieved him.
Yeah, I think just not having him home, it's so bizarre. I would go sit in his room like every day when he first left. And I just lay in his bed, smell him. And the thing is, I didn't regret it. I knew he needed to be there, but he's my oldest. That's my boy.
He's part of you.
Yeah. You go out to the grocery store and you see his friends. And right after he left, I had his cell phone, which was eye-opening. I think any parent to have their kid's cell phone nowadays is eye-opening. But then you add on the substance abuse, and it was just confirmation after confirmation that what we did was right. The pictures, the videos, the things that I saw.
Cathy, what happened when you posted your story on Facebook?
It opened up a world I wasn't prepared for. But I think, everybody was talking about the epidemic or the pandemic of COVID.
Yep.
And I'm like, but yet no one's talking about what's happening to our kids in the middle of it. We're all busy about vaccination, mask, our schools open, not open. And we're losing our kids. I mean, we live in a little suburban neighborhood where you just kind of think you're in this bubble that it's not going to happen in my home. That's what happens out there. And so I posted pictures of the things, the drug, the paraphernalia. I mean, it was things that you would find around your house. And I wanted parents to know because things started disappearing in our home that I never associated with drug use. Metal straws, different things. And I thought there's nothing I can do to help Christian now. This is his journey while he's in rehab. He has to do his work. But I want other parents to know things I wish I had known, discussions I wish other people had shared with me. And I posted pictures of the drug use. I didn't really talk too much about Christian's story because that's his to share, but mentioned that he was in rehab. And the outpouring was unlike anything I've ever seen. The private messages of parents that were like, Cathy, when you posted this, all of a sudden I knew this is exactly what's going on in my home, but no, I never knew language for certain things that were happening. I didn't know what it looked like for things in our home to disappear, behavior, just the shame and guilt and the ripple that it has from the person who uses to everybody in their life. And it just stays in the darkness, and it...
Okay, so you were ashamed, you were crying. Why did it happen to my son? What made you decide to reach out?
I think I'm a huge communicator. I love people. I have a heart for people. I have a heart for people in crisis. I think I'm just wired that way. And I just felt like I started work at the prison as a volunteer during our divorce. And I think that is the most real, authentic conversation I've had with people. At their rock bottom, there's no pretending that life is something it's not when you're in prison. And I think I craved that on the outside.
So now today, fast forward today.
Yeah, I wish I could say He's sober. But one thing there's two things I constantly have to bring myself back to. It's progress, not perfection. And I'm not where I wish we were, but we're not where we were a year ago. We brought him home. So he left September of last year. We brought him home December. So we're coming up on a year of him being home. And he is back in school. He is passing his classes. He is proud of himself for the first time in a long time. Substance abuse is still there, but it's not to the extent. I see a lot of parents kind of get tired of fighting the battle, and I'm tired at times, but I will never stop fighting. We have a no drug policy in our home. There are times I find it, I confiscate it. It causes some chaos in our home for a moment, but there are certain things I will not bend on, and his sobriety is one of them. And he knows that once he's ready to walk into that fully, we have his back 100%. And until then, we'll fight it.
How is Brooke and Christian today?
Their relationship is night and day. He used to just nag on her like, she was always that scapegoat for him. Like, well, I'm sorry I'm not as perfect as Brooke. I'm sorry that you just love her more. And she shut down towards him probably 2 years prior to him leaving for rehab. He has not said one ugly comment to her since he's been home. She went to her first homecoming, and he was a little protective of her dress. And he was a big brother. You know, he was involved, and he cared, and he was outside of... He had created this world that was just about him prior to rehab, very selfish. And now he's always curious, like if a boy comes over after, who is that? Who's that guy? And I love it. I love seeing a sibling relationship again, and that love and concern. And I mean, they didn't hug or anything. I mean, there was no physical contact prior, unless it was aggressive, you know? And he'll just go over and just hug her. And I mean, those are moments where I'm just tears and I have to walk away because I know he'll turn around and be like, what? What's the big deal? So I just leave the room and cry in by myself. But it's beautiful. Their relationship is night and day.
What is the positive?
I think there's power in community. I think COVID has showed that. I think going through your stroke, you couldn't have done it without the people around you. We were surrounded by people. Once I was vulnerable enough to share my story, people came out of the woodwork of, Cathy, I'm a recovering addict of 20 years. People I had walked life with forever, but they had kept that piece of them quiet.
And aren't you proud of yourself? Yes.
I don't know if I consider it proud, or I don't know that.
You unveiled. You made vulnerability breeds vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for people that have come alongside us. I'm thankful. And I'm really grateful of all the work I've done in the prison for the last 4 years. I have never, ever had context for substance use, which is massive within prison. And I now understand it better. I have a different view on it. I have a different ability to help and come alongside that I didn't have before. So there's been so many blessings, so many. I mean, almost to the point of that I would say I don't regret that we've walked this. Almost. Once he's on the other end and sober,
It's
I
a
will
page
say
in
fully.
life, right?
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
do you think he would say?
You know,
Or has he said?
when he was in rehab, he would say things like, if you guys hadn't done this, I don't know what would have happened to me. You saved my life. He knew how bad it was. We didn't know the extent of it. Him sober is very different than him using. Our only conflict now is when he's caught using and he erupts because substance abuse is ugly.
Yeah. It's a trained habit. Yeah.
And it changes the chemical makeup in your brain. And so when he was sober and away, that was my kid. And it is really hard bringing him back into this world because while he did all his work, none of his friends did. And our culture, our schools are saturated with substance use. So he is going to have to fight tooth and nail. I think he is just genetically predispositioned. We have it on both sides of our family. He does not have the luxury to dip his foot in here and there at a party. He is an all or nothing. And I pray one day he walks over to the complete nothing side like he was in rehab, because he saw things clear and he was able to decipher his emotions. He was grateful.
Now, can you let him walk that road for himself without feeling guilty?
Yeah, I've released that. I know I haven't been perfect as a parent. I know I've done.
Who is?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that I've also realized I love him so much. And all I can do is hold him accountable, set my boundaries, and then just remind him I'm there and I love him, and the rest is for him to walk.
Okay. What is your legacy going to be for this chapter of your life?
I think just the power of love and trusting yourself. Because I think I questioned myself so much until I had my husband's support. You know, I think I questioned, even though my gut kept telling me, Cathy, this is bad, something's wrong. And I think so often, especially as women, you're supposed to be making everybody else happy. And I neglected myself and how I was feeling, and knowing that I know my kid better than anybody. So I hope the legacy of this season is to trust yourself, to reach out for support, to be vulnerable, to let go of what other people think. You know, I have the stigma of I have a kid that went to rehab. And I can now say, so what?
Okay.
You know what? That was a chapter in our lives. And so letting go of what other people think, I think I've always been hyper concerned about that. And now I really don't care.
All the lesson that you taught me. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Do you have a story to share? I'd love to hear from you. Please visit LoriCorken.com. There you will find more stories like the one you heard today with our series, The Power of a Voice.